Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BI Livecast series. My name is Carrie Keenan. I'm one of the program directors here at Friend Innovators. I want to welcome you all to the LGBTQ plus marketing livecast today. And it's really special today because, as you all know, it's the last day of Pride Month. We want to celebrate Pride each and every day with everyone, but we're really honored to have everyone celebrating with us today here. So we have a phenomenal event with an awesome lineup of marketers. Before we get started, just want to thank everyone, all the marketers and sponsors, and you, the audience, for helping today make this event possible. Throughout the event, you'll be able to use our Q&A widget and our chat widget down at the bottom of your screen. We encourage you to engage with our speakers and the other attendees using those widgets throughout today's program. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Alessandra Antonucci and their moderator, Larry Biermann. Come on up to the stage, guys.
Hi there.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining, Alessandra.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I guess to get us started, do you want to tell us a little bit about your role over at Fossil, both from day to day and then also kind of the community efforts and association type of work that you're doing there?
Sure. So, hi, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alessandra Antonucci. I'm the Senior Global Brand Marketing Director on Fossil Brand over at Fossil Group. In addition to that, I'm also a founder of a queer-owned business, Queer and Ally, that celebrates Pride all year long. But my role at Fossil and the topic we'll be discussing today is really centered around LGBTQ plus marketing as a huge global brand. And our day-to-day, for my team at least, is really centered around the global marketing guidance. So Fossil has, organizations around the globe really centering around what is our campaign initiatives and how do we communicate that out to the regions, to help build awareness for the brand at the different stages of the business that they're all at.
Okay, great. So, and looking through the lens of what we're talking about today, how does Fossil and how does your team go about including, diverse voices from the LGBT community and making sure that people feel represented in the marketing work that you're doing?
Sure. So, of course, we want to celebrate Pride in the month of June and really be there to be an ally to the community, to our customers, to our coworkers, etc. But really, inclusion starts year-round. And for us, we make sure that throughout our marketing initiatives, whether it's various other campaigns, through influencer marketing, or through other community means, that we're really making sure that we're engaging with the LGBTQ community and have representation throughout our marketing initiatives.
Okay, great. I know you mentioned, and I kind of skipped over myself, I'm Larry Biermann, and I'm Chief Growth Officer at Gen Video, and we're an influencer company, grounded in social commerce. And so I know you mentioned influencers there. So are there any favorite influencers that you've partnered with this year from the LGBT community that people would know out there?
Sure. So I have Rafni there. She identifies as a lesbian, and she has a wife that's a doctor, and they have a beautiful family. So we worked with them during our campaign initiative, and they just give a great reminder that families can look many different ways. And that's important, especially as we talk about what certain bills mean that are coming up in the US around Don't Say Gay or other things, and how they affect children when speaking about their family. But also Blair Imani, she's been in our Pride campaigns multiple times. If anyone hasn't checked out her content, she does these 60 tongue twister, second videos called Smarter in Seconds, and really addresses a multitude of human rights issues, or political issues at hand, or just in general, things that make you smarter in 60 seconds that you should know more about. And she created a video for us centered around Pride Month and what it means to be an ally, both in and outside of the community, because that allyship is important in the LGBTQ community as well. So she's also a great resource if someone wants to learn more about things going on in the world today, specifically the US.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess what other, ways is the brand connecting with the community through, whether that's custom made content for those voices outside of influencers? I guess just what other maybe events do you participate in or have recently that people would want to know about?
Sure. So for us, we really focus on our work within empowering young people. So we've worked with the Trevor Project for the last 2 years, as well as some other LGBT organizations. So what we'll try to do throughout the year is engage those organizations to see how we can both continue to collaborate with them throughout the year, but then also bring their knowledge inside of our 4 walls or virtual 4 walls so that we can continue to educate our community, our fossil community from within about topics that are going on in the that affect the LGBTQ community.
Kind of got it. Yeah. And so I know that was kind of the next question up was, every marketer is, focusing more and more on Gen Z. And so has there been, recent changes of like how you approach that community compared to others, or, do you have different messaging for the like from Gen Z to millennial to baby boomer? Do you kind of approach them differently, or is there like a cohesive message for all?
I think there's a cohesive message really for all. I think what we try to do, because Fossil is a large global brand, we really try to kind of talk about things that cross over generationally and also culturally. So for instance, this year's campaign, Take a Minute, was really about taking a minute to understand the community, taking a minute within the community to celebrate, but also taking a minute for allyship. So for us, we really try to find that crossover because, marketing spend isn't endless, unfortunately. So we really want to make sure that we're creating something that applies. And you'll see that with the influencers that we use. They were a multitude of ages, and their content kind of shifts in between different generations, but I don't think it felt exclusive to a demographic. It really was inclusive for that.
Got it. And then speaking to kind of going back a little bit to what you said earlier, the community does not love it when, brands are like, it's June. I'm going to change the color of my logo. I'm not going to do anything else. And I know you just mentioned the year-long campaign that you're doing, but I guess for brands that are trying to approach it in a better way, when you talk about the always on annual campaigns, like, are those coming like utilizing voices from the community, but speaking, just about their experience with the brand, or is it kind of pride focused all year long?
No, I mean, I think it's about representation, right? So we don't always need rainbows, to resemble I think Pride Month is about using our voice and celebrating in a month and making sure that, we have a spotlight on the issues that affect us year round. And I think brands have a place to use their platform during that month to elevate that conversation. But at the end of the day, that conversation is elevated during that month because it needs to be recognized throughout a whole year. So for us, it's about representation. So when you talk about Valentine's Day, making sure that you have representation for what Valentine's Day is to a multitude of different relationships, not just, a cis heteronormative definition of what a couple is, and or gifting messages, or even Father's Day, celebrating, or Mother's Day, celebrating in an inclusive way to any type of family unit that you may have. But then also just, influencers are a great resource to increase your diversity among your marketing, and just, at the end of the day, a style influencer, making sure that you're representing the community that is shopping your brand, or the community at large, from just a Gen Pop perspective, is important. So I think always making sure that you have that reflection in your marketing campaigns is really important year round as well. And then for us also internally is a huge importance for us. So Fossil is rated a 100 on the HRC's best places to work for the LGBT community, and that is also year round. And we make sure that that is expressed as well when we talk about it during Pride, but even outside of Pride.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing to hear. And in doing research for the call, I was starting to Google, and I was like, oh, I hope I come across all these wonderful things that they're doing, and not, one of the companies that is, again, promoting those things. And I was able to find so much on the organization. But, I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but if there's anything you can expand on across, if it's still called the Fossil Foundation with the HMI partnership, or with the Trevor Project, like you were saying, just that community work that the organization is doing, if that's funding, if that's days off for employees and volunteering, or any of that.
Yeah, sure. So Fossil Group does give VTO time. So, and you are highly asked to use it. So, which is great. And you can use that for a variety of topics, not specific to any kind of specific time of year or initiative. HMI, the Hedrick Martin Institute, is one of the nation's oldest youth LGBT organizations. They have been a previous partner for years of the foundation. So there's Fossil brand, and then there's foundation. And now 1% of our proceeds of every purchase go to foundation work. And that is to really help encourage, and inspire opportunity for young people globally. And as part of that initiative, working with young LGBT people, because, in many cases, they could be disadvantaged in certain ways. So HMI does a lot of work around that. And then with Trevor Project, they were a brand partner that we brought in. And so Fossil donates 100% of their proceeds of their Pride product to Trevor Project. And Trevor Project is one of the nation's largest youth LGBT organizations to support in mental health and assistance for young people within the community. And, that is specifically really important to us because the southern region of the US has the highest suicide rate of LGBT youth than any other part of the country. So being in Texas, they're a great partner for us, and we see them as a key resource for this area that we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in speaking to that and everything that's going on, do you have, I guess, 6 sides to this question, a positive outlook on behavior and consumer expectations and what will stick and be positive in the future, or kind of what are your thoughts and thinking about everything that's happening right now and kind of where we're headed as a population?
Sure. So I think, where we're headed as a population, unfortunately, will bring equality issues, I think, across the board to many different groups. And I think brands, especially those who speak for Pride and for the LGBT community or other communities during different initiatives throughout the year, will start to be held accountable for support in other ways. So I think it's a hard line we walk as a brand, and it just always goes back to authenticity. So, you want to be able to support a community, not just profit off of them. So I think it's really important for brands to kind of take that step back as these laws are changing. And what does that mean for the impact, not only for the community that they're marketing to, because they want to be able to celebrate that time of year with them, but then what does it mean for the internal organization as well and the people that work for them? So, being employee first is always a great start for authenticity, I believe. And thankfully, at Fossil, we definitely live and breathe that. And then making sure that any initiatives that you act on for communities within your customer segments are also feeling that authenticity of support is really important.
Absolutely. So like a little add-on question of that one has, is Fossil, are you still a remote company? Are people everywhere?
Mm-hmm.
Are people allowed to move, based on kind of what's going on? Or has that not been approached yet?
So currently we are a hybrid organization. So some of us have returned back to our office, but at the same time, even before these issues were coming up, after COVID, some people do work remotely just because culture overall has changed. I think as political climates change, this is definitely a topic that is going to become a hot one. And I just think it's an ever-changing climate. So as of right now, we don't really, I know that there's discussion around it, but we don't, I don't have an answer for that. But I would imagine that as things continue to change, it's definitely something that brands and companies need to be aware of in the states that they operate in, and how it affects their employees.
Absolutely. So I guess for you personally, do you you think that brands should, have a strong voice politically about issues like this, or more so, make sure they're putting funds where they think it should be and not quite as loud? Kind of where would you personally love lots of brands to be like, is it their space to be, pushing the political space or not as much?
Yeah. I think that's a really difficult question, and it depends on what's authentic to a brand. So I think lots of brands can make bold political statements, but then at the same time, they're donating to parties that are voting against a lot of the rights that they're trying to empower their employees for. And we see that a lot with what just happened. So I think it goes back to transparency and authenticity, right? So I think, unfortunately, the political climate is shifting radically. And then also, at the end of the day, we are businesses. So how it affects what we can do is something that's ever changing in the landscape. But at the end of the day, again, it's like authenticity. Like, I'm happy that some brands are creating funds, but at the same time, if they really wanted to make an impact, they wouldn't have donated to political parties. So I think it's really important to think about your employees first and what matters to them and how do you keep them safe, and then create actions for that. And then that'll translate to a consumer. They'll see that in authenticity of action. But to make a statement because it's on trend can be really irresponsible when there's background for how you didn't support those groups in other decisions that you made previously in the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't remember if we've talked about much the internal group where you're the co-chair for the LGBT group internally. But I guess are there, interesting things that you're doing and changing there compared to maybe other organizations you've worked at in the past, or maybe even have like tips for other businesses to avoid certain pitfalls when running an internal community like that?
Sure. So I think ERGs, employee resource groups, are great opportunities for organizations to have employee-led groups that really talk about how different things affect them. So at Fossil, we have one for the Latinx community, we have one for women, we have one for the African-American community, and we get together as a community. We have discussions. The one for the LGBT group is called Plus, and that I'm a co-chair of. And sometimes we have candid conversations that you feel like you're in a safe space, and you can say, "I am scared as hell about what's going on right now and what that means." And and what comes out of that as a resource group, we start talking about, well, what can we do for our community within this building? Who can we talk to? Can we talk to the local LGBT resource center and see if they can help us understand what are the legal ramifications of things that we need to do to help? So whether that's creating a power of attorney, a will, second parent adoption papers, these are things that are focused. We want to focus on how do we help the community within, and what resources can we give them for that help? And then, on the lighter side, sometimes it's about, finding what kind of entertainment, entertainment that has representation, that's really great. I think times like that is really important, and so much sorrow also, to remember how to laugh within your community and find entertainment within your community, so it's not all doom and gloom. And then the last part is just about, using them as a resource, even for, at least from a brand perspective, like, making product for these different cultural moments, making sure that you're doing it in a sensitive way. Does the community feel like it does give them a voice, and is it authentic to them? I think they can be a really great resource for brands to turn internally and have a focus group to make sure that they're doing things that matter to that community in an impactful way, and in a sensitive way, to make sure that they're thinking of using that voice, leading with that voice first of that community versus a commercial-led voice.
Yeah, absolutely. And to continue on that front, of course, you see all sorts of things come out in June, and some of them are, funny and lighthearted, like you're saying, and some you're like, that's funny, but I don't know if you should be the one that's saying that. Mm-hmm. We didn't talk about this before, but are there other brands that you've seen that have you've been like, that's a great approach to it, or inspiring, or gets the thoughts going for you on your side?
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess as a customer, right? I walked into Target and I saw their Pride collection, which comes out much earlier. And I was like, oh, I think I'm a little offended by some of this stuff. But then as I read a little more about it, they actually created the Pride lines with people within the LGBT community across the design categories. And so I think that's also important in marketing, is that sometimes, you want to make sure you're telling consumers where it's coming from too. And, so I was even blinded by that as a consumer for a second, until I felt more. I think, a lot of times, we all know what happened with Burger King and their tops and bottoms. That
was the one I was referencing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, agencies sometimes have the best of intentions, but you do have to see where it lands. And that's where I think having those focus groups, or having ERGs, or, really making sure that you test that kind of, I don't want to use the word provocative, but maybe, a humor that is a little more personal to that community. You want to make sure it lands right. And I feel like a broken record saying like authenticity, but I think it is important to make sure that you're sensitive, that it lands right within the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the community at large, somehow with this, I'm sure, very demanding job that you have, finding time to, run an organization of your own. I know you mentioned at the very beginning, but can you tell us a little bit more about, is that for local support, where you are, kind of a resource for anyone? Where can people find more in what you do?
Sure. So right now, Queer and Ally is a business that my wife and I founded. It's a queer marketplace. And it really is just a resource to find community stuff that isn't just, specific to Pride Month. And it came from, we got married and, people were saying like they couldn't find a same-sex card, or that, they really wanted to get us something fun for the house, or to celebrate our, and it just, you couldn't find anything year round. Or if it was like one shop that they said was in maybe like a trendier or more, whatever kind of area of town. So we just decided we would create that. But I mean, we donate 10% of our profits year round. And we think that's really important to give back to the community. We try to use all queer makers for it, to give them a platform, or really strong advocate allies. Like, it's not just saying you're an ally, but truly making content and giving back to the community as an ally. And I think in the long run, our hope is that we can create an actual brick and mortar location that people can come and rent out for their special events, or have a gallery space for queer artists and a center to create activism on behalf of the community and activate. But COVID has as usual made those plans a little more longer term than we'd like. But eventually, we would love to have a place where we can meet together to discuss and get guidance on things going on, so that we can better arm our community with the knowledge that they need in order to protect themselves and their families.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of a little bit more on that, both, at Fossil and in your own organization. You mentioned like at Fossil, the several groups internally for inclusion. Is there a collaborative approach to the different organizations that you have there, or other orgs that you work with that kind of represent beyond LGBT and kind of working with other people who are usually, left by the wayside in the marketing community in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for different moments, whether it's Black History Month or Women's History Month, we try to sing also with the Hispanic Heritage Month. We really try to go to these groups and understand, what is important. Is it activism within the community? Do you want to see us creating initiatives, pathways for mentorship and internships? Do you want to create, what kind of impact do we want to create aside from products? And sometimes it is products. Sometimes it is about wearing something that's prideful for them, and they want to wear something that represents their community or from a creator within their community. So I think we really try to collaborate with them on those moments. And then also from like a collaborations perspective of product around making sure that we have a diverse intersection of collaborators to bring into our brand and create product with that isn't specifically around a cultural moment, but is just representative of diversity and inclusion, and what our stances are for that as an organization. Absolutely.
Are there any, examples of the products, the ones that you've custom made for different groups that you've loved and that were created?
Yeah. So for Black History Month last year, or this year, in fashion, my years are always confused. I think it was this year, 2022. We created a jewelry piece and a watch for Black History Month. And the tins, which are an important part of Fossil's DNA, was co-created with a Black artist. So I think, being able to tell the story of the designers behind that product, being able to tell the story of the packaging and working and collaborating with that, as well as donating to a fund to help artists within the African-American community was, I think, a really bold way of bringing that to market for the first time. We've done watches for International Women's Day before. We've worked with artists that have created from paintings, they created watch faces that showed the diversity of women globally, and that was a really fun project. But I think every year we kind of challenge ourselves for what does it look like next year, and how do we make sure it is done in a way that feels like someone wants to come back to the brand to get it again, but also brings in new customers in a way that makes them feel like they are seen and respected by the brand, most importantly, that the brand's giving to their community in more ways than just a donation.
Absolutely. And for that part, a lot of organizations have, for different things, whether it was the influencers they work with, the vendors they work with, the partners they have, within your own organization, you mentioned that trying to always have people from the queer community who are, the providers. Is there and at Fossil, and you think larger, like, should people and brands and companies attain to like 50% diversity inclusion on programming, or do you think it's more fluid than that or higher than that? Kind of where do you think that should be for yourself, your org, the larger marketing space?
Sure. So I think, I think it can be more fluid than that, but I know from a procurement perspective that when it comes to our factories and practices, and other ways of gauging standards across the organization, we want to make sure that diversity is met, and we do have standards for human rights protections for different groups, from everything from our factories to our organization headquarters globally. So, and the same thing goes for representation and marketing. We do fill out audits for that so that we can report it. Our first one comes out this year. So, but we've been reporting them internally for years. So I think it's really important to work with your DE&I or parts of the organization, HR, procurement, to make sure that you are meeting those standards, but also pushing those standards and working together as an organization in order to create what a truly diverse organization looks like that protects human rights from a factory to warehouse to a headquarters.
Absolutely. And that was a perfect segue into thinking about, I can't wrap my head around anyone who has a global role for a brand, because it's just, I can't imagine that the inclusiveness, the customization, all of that. But when it comes to the brand globally, do you customize per region or per country, or is it again like a cohesive voice across the globe?
Sure. I mean, I think it is a struggle for any global marketer. I think an even harder struggle is the regional teams that have multiple countries. Because, for example, even a North American team, doesn't have the amount of countries that, let's say, EMEA does or APAC does. And all of those countries have very different sensibilities to them and sensitivities too. But for the most part, we try to keep a global tone and voice. There are some initiatives with certain countries that are key markets for us that we will build localized campaigns. But it's always under the guidance of the global brand voice, but the casting maybe, like, for example, in India, we use 2 Bollywood celebrities. So the casting is local, but the look and feel of the content, we try to bridge whatever is the most relevant and feels most on brand for those settings. And I think the same thing with certain countries are obviously more, for things like Pride, are more involved culturally in that and have their own pride movements that are very vocal, and some are a little more conservative. So we kind of have to strike the balance between that. But at the end of the day, everyone's provided the same assets for the most part. And we try to push one global story, but obviously with spend and business initiatives, that does become quite a bargaining tool that our friends in other countries try to go back and forth with. But it's a welcomed conversation always. And at the end of the day, it's about trying to drive the business in that country and what's needed to make them successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there, I guess, anywhere you want to see companies play in the future besides, I know you've mentioned it a few times, like having more money is always better to be able to do more.
Yeah.
But I guess, are there things anything that you're excited about in the future of what Fossil might be doing with this, with the community, or where you would love to be participating, or if it's just, like you've said, more money, more scale?
Yeah, I think more money, more scale is good across the board, not even specific to any one initiative. But no, I think it's just about representation for all, communities. I think, watching what's happening in entertainment and the representation that's occurring in entertainment across the board for the LGBTQ community, it really does mean something at any age for you to see that and be able to see a storyline that feels like what your life looks like. So I think just continuing to push through these moments and show that, what holiday looks like in different family units. What does Valentine's Day look like? Sometimes it can feel like a simple gesture, but it actually means a lot for that person who sees that representation in that ad and feels seen by a brand and feels seen by, I think it also helps for advocating. I think it helps, unfortunately, to use a word that I feel like can be somewhat triggering. Like, I think it helps to normalize it too. And I think that's, at the end of the day, the role that brands and entertainment play in showing that and having that representation out in the world. It shows acceptance. And I think that's the most important part.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Netflix has done an amazing job, in my opinion, in that, because when I now turn on my TV and see like you're saying, the thumbnails for all of them, I'm like, this is totally different. And then seeing the funding that's happening with, especially within our community, of like the Billy Eichner rom-com that everyone is so excited about, that's coming out like started promoting it months in advance. It's just a totally different like place. And the same thing within the Asian community, seeing them, getting more and more funding and representation there. It's been wonderful. But I don't want to hog all the questions, and I've been berating you with them for a while. So I don't know if there's anything from the audience that they wanted to cover, or if there was anything else that you wanted to cover as a part of the conversation today, or make sure that you got across, kind of what you came here to say.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it is, said again, just about authenticity and what feels right. And, really just making sure that you have voices at the table that represent the communities that you're creating these campaigns for and these products for, because I think that's how you end up maybe with a little bit of a Burger King situation, is when you don't have the person at the table. Or people at the table. You shouldn't have one person at the table. You should have people at the table that represent that community. So I think, being open to having those conversations and not creating these campaigns in silos is really important for, to make sure it's authentic and actually is led with good intention. And because even the best intentions can still fall flat if there's not that person at, those people at the table to say it, this is accurate or this isn't. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess to that point, how large is the Plus group internally? Do you find it is people are excited and ready to join and help out, or is it a little bit of a struggle to get as large a group as you want?
No, we have about 100 members across I don't know the number across the ERGs. So I think that that number, I think the largest one is the women's ERG. So I think, it's growing like any life that's happening with people. It is hard because it's meetings and more meetings on meetings. But I think it's kind of like the gym. You go and you may be like, oh, I have to go. I have to make time for it. And then you leave and you feel great when you come out of it all the time. So I think, keeping that up is important too, because you remember to be in a safe space with people who are like-minded and have can also sympathize with what you're going through at any given moment, whether it be highs or lows. With Pride, it's hopefully a lot of highs. And we did the Dallas Pride this year as an organization led by the ERG, and that was fun. And so you get to celebrate together. Sometimes you may cry together. Sometimes you may laugh together. So I think it's really great. And I also think it's really great also within, because the resources we're bringing in are also teaching people within the community. Like, our community is ever changing, and the allyship that's required from within the community to help those that need a stronger voice at the table is ever changing as well. So I think the ERG has done a lot to educate each other on pronouns, educate each other on trans rights and why it's so important to advocate within the community for one another. So I think also recognizing that even within a community, it's really important to advocate, and those groups can be a resource for helping us understand what we need to do better as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think, like you said, it's just great to focus on the things that are positively changing. There's been such huge strides. Even thinking back myself 15 years ago, it's like not even the same world and how we interact with everyone within it.
For sure.
Yeah. But thank you so much again for your time and your experience, and for supporting so many people at your organization and just everything that you're doing over there.
Great. Thank you guys for having me and having this moment to talk about it as we close out Pride.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. That was great. And I love the ERG as a gym analogy. I think that's just fantastic.
I do go to the ERG more than I go to the gym, that is for sure.
It all works. It all works.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, you guys. All right. We want to welcome up our next speakers to the stage. We have Brent Miller and their moderator, Jennifer Silverberg.
Think I'm on.
Hi. Okay. I'm trying to make it work here. How are you?
Oops. Did we lose Carrie?
Oh, I just had a cat try and dive bomb and I turned off my camera, but I will let you two take it away.
I am telling you, this has been the best thing, getting to actually see people's real lives, right? Which is kind of what we're talking about today. So I am so excited about this conversation today. I was lucky enough to get to catch up with Brent and have a conversation ahead. And P&G has been a client for a long time. And so we're very familiar with their kind of relentless focus on the consumer experience. But now I'm kind of like this fangirl after talking to Brent. And so I'm excited to let everybody else kind of learn what I learned. And I had a lot to learn. So I'm going to jump into that rather than talking about me. Brent, can you give us kind of an intro to you and what you do and how you do it?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for having me. In full disclosure, I'm in the midst of a construction zone right now within my apartment that I didn't fully expect today. So you may hear a little clanging behind me. But I'm Brent Miller with Procter & Gamble. I lead our global LGBTQ equality practice. And so basically that role is fully focused on how we approach the LGBTQ consumer, how we're creating stories, connecting with that consumer, and then how that shapes a lot of our corporate policy, our brand building efforts, and so on and so forth. In the last conversation, there was a lot of conversation about ERGs and kind of an employee focus. And while that's part of my job, the main part of my job is more focused on brand building. And that has been a role that evolved over the last several years to become a full-time role, as we realized both the increasing importance of the LGBT consumer, but also the need to drive capability in that area, because it is a bit of the wild, wild west in terms of brand building. And I think we've, as was just discussed with Alessandra and Larry, there's been some that do it really, really well, and there's some that have kind of stepped in it a bit. And we want to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to put that authentic voice forward and get representation accurate.
So for those of us, and I know there've been a lot of panels today, so maybe some of what I'm going to ask you to go over is repeating, but for those of us who are still learning how this community is growing and how it's changing, can you help us understand what P&G knows? How does P&G, because there are a lot of letters in that acronym. How does P&G look at this, and what have you learned?
Well, I think there's a growing recognition that this isn't about just the right thing to do. It's a growth strategy as we look long-term at how we're going to win with consumers. And it's becoming more and more evident that to win with future households and with power households, to win with Gen Z, you have to win with LGBTQ. So it's not a bolted on strategy to think about what are we doing for the LGBTQ market. It's really looking at what are we doing for a general market that's inclusive of LGBTQ. With up to 31% of Gen Z now identifying as being part of the community, you can't extract the two. And I think that's the important thing that brand builders have become to realize. And frankly, it makes the conversation a lot easier, because it removes the emotion element of being the right thing to do, to defining very clear growth strategies and clearly outlining the objective reasons why LGBTQ is fundamental to our businesses. And I think we can talk about the what is the right number, what is the wrong number of who's represented in the community. But one thing is clear is the generation upon generation growth is exponential, and there is no sign that is going to slow down. And part of that is driven by an expanding definition of what the LGBT community entails. So as we more fully embrace the Q or the queer or the non-binary, that has led to a changing definition of people that identify, and certainly an element of safety where people are more comfortable being out, they're more comfortable being out in their communities, in their workplace, so on and so forth. You have more people just being out. So I think that there's just been a huge cultural metamorphosis. You know, one professor that we work with would say this has been the largest cultural metamorphosis we've ever experienced in terms of changing culture identity and the quickness in which that has happened. And there's a growing recognition that marketers, by and large, have been a little bit slow in recognizing what that can mean for their businesses. And in turn, then what that means for your workplace, what that means for what you do in the community, what that means for the business partners that you work with. So I think that's a bit of the dynamic that we're looking at. And I think the other element to this is a growing recognition that this is not an LGBTQ market. Like, I think calling it a market is underserving and underrepresenting what the community is made up of. This is really an L market, a G market, a B market, a T market, a Q market. It gets lumped together for a variety of different reasons, which are rather understandable. But when it comes to brand building, we can't just lump them together and assume that if I have a gay male representation, I'm representative of the queer market. If I have transgender representation, that represents the queer market, so on and so forth. So it's complicated, and it's going to continue to get more complicated as the definitions of what it means to be LGBTQ changes. And I think importantly, it's complicated within our own community. It's complicated generationally. Like the way my experience as a 45-year-old gay cisgender man is very different than a 25-year-old white gay cisgender man. And so we have to continue to research, go deep, really do our homework on what this community means, because no two groups within the community are the same, and it's evolving all the time.
So what I'm hearing is something that's way bigger than inclusion. You use the word representation, but I think you mean something bigger than that. And by the way, this reminds me a lot of what we've been through as women, where it was like, check the box, there's a woman there, or we saw African-American. We've seen a lot of shifts. I want to ask you about how it's different, but first I want to ask about, what does this really mean to get beyond that surface level of, or at least inclusion feels like surface level to me. Maybe it's not. Help me understand, or help us understand, what does success look like? What matters?
I think representation is kind of like LGBTQ 101. Just having people present and being able to see themselves is a given. I think that's a basic expectation. What we have to make sure that we're doing is we're going in and getting the insights about what is resonating with the community, so that we can focus on both relevancy of that representation, and then how that resonates. And there's a lot of different ways to get there, but just having an LGBTQ person on the screen or on the page, wherever it might be, is a positive step forward, because it may allow someone to see themselves represented and connected for the first time. But what we want to do is get to a higher level order of empathy through resonance and relevancy that helps people step into the shoes of an LGBTQ person, or helps them see themselves in the communications that we're putting out, that creates a commonality. Because I think when we are best as brand builders, we're representing the full human experience. And that should be able to connect with people, whether in the LGBT community or not, because the experience is real and the portrayal of it is accurate and authentic. I think the word authentic is thrown around a little bit too much, because I think it's hard to define what that is. But I think if someone can see an ad, a film, or something that you put out and says like, I get that nuance, or that brand has done their homework so that I can see myself represented, it allows to not only bring our communities more closely together, but it allows you to create a longer term relationship with the consumer, because they understand that you get who they are. And that goes a lot further than representation.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. You start with representation. And you said something to me yesterday around the distance between, how brands can be with this. And now I'm struggling with the word because you don't want segment audience. This set of audiences can range from anything from hostile, you're not welcome here, to help me understand that range of how do we look at our own brands and the things that we're doing as either employers, which we talked a lot about on the last panel, or as marketers, and understand where we are in that.
Well, I think it's interesting that there's a dynamic within the LGBTQ community that may be a bit more unique or pronounced versus some other underserved or marginalized communities, in that there's a bit of a default that if you are not intentionally inclusive, if you're not out there being incredibly direct in your support of the community, in that representation and that authentic resonance and relevancy, that you are against the community. It's kind of the idea of allyship, right? Like a silent ally is just as ineffective as a silent enemy. And so as brands that are supportive of the community, you need to be intentional, right? Because there's a default to hostility. And when we can help our brand builders understand that, like, passive inclusivity doesn't do anything for your business. It may help your employees. And so what I mean by passive inclusivity is you may have all the right policies, practices, procedures. You may have an outstanding ERG. You may have all of your health benefits lined up, the whole 9 yards. And that's going to be terrific for employee recruitment, retention, so on and so forth. But for the consumer, they may not see that. And so we have to think about how we are publicly demonstrating our support of the community through our words, action, deeds, in our communications, in what we're doing in our communities, in addition to what we're doing within the workplace.
So what can that look like? What's the how do you know when you're there, I guess, or how do you know that it's enough? It's as a cisgendered straight female, I can guess, and I feel like I'm empathetic and I can try, but how do I know? How do we know as a marketer that we're not just being passively inclusive, as you said, but actively inclusive? I love that difference, by the way.
Yeah, well, it's a really important nuance, and we've seen some brands, I've seen some companies say like, hey, we're walking the talk. And I'm like, does the consumer know that you're doing that?
Oh,
and is that enough, right? And one of the things that we challenge all of our brands to first identify is, what is the role of your category with the LGBTQ consumer? What role does your category play in their life? Okay. And you have to really understand that, because it's going to vary from brand to brand, category to category. And then what is your brand's point of view based on that understanding? And when you get to that point, then you've now established a reason why your brand is in the conversation, versus we just want to join the party. It's like, we're bringing something to the party. We're bringing something to the conversation. We're helping connect a real need of the LGBT community into the services or benefits and products that we provide. And then once you can really articulate that very clearly, then you can create communication that supports that. And I think that eliminates a lot of the risk that many brands feel in entering an LGBTQ conversation, because you've clearly established, this is why I'm talking to you. It gets a bit away from the rainbow washing to giving you a sense of purpose that's directly linked to the service and benefits that you provide. So that's an easy first step to just understand the relationship that you have with the community, and using that as the basis of your way forward.
So you had a couple of videos that you showed me that illustrated this. Are you able to share that on here? I think we figured out it was okay.
Yeah, we forgot to do it. And the first one I'm going to share with you is from Gillette. And I think they clearly identified a human insight, right? That the first time you shave, no matter how you identify, is an important rite of passage in your life. And then by putting a transgender lens on that, they were able to bring to life that moment in a completely different way that not only connects with the transgender community, but the LGBT community more broadly can relate to it. And I think as a non-LGBTQ person, you can see yourself represent that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share that. I think I'm going to share that. Hold on 1 second, please. Okay, here we go. Is that showing that up there? Okay.
Yep, looks great.
Growing up, I was always trying to figure out what kind of man I wanted to become, and I'm still trying to figure out what kind of man that I want to become. I always knew I was different. I didn't know that there was a term for the type of person that I was. I went into my transition just wanting to be happy. I'm glad I'm at the point where I'm able to shave. South, south, north, north, east, west, never in a hurry.
Yeah.
Right.
One. Now don't be scared. Don't be scared. Shaving is about being confident. Oh, you're doing fine. You are doing fine.
I'm at the point in my manhood where I'm actually happy. It's not just myself transitioning, it's everybody around me transitioning.
So I think it's an interesting example because you understand why Gillette's having that conversation. And it's not a political conversation. It's a human conversation. Samson, the gentleman in the ad shaving for the first time, that's really his father in the ad. And so you see familial relationships depicted. You see what support can look like at the familial level. That's the one of the things that we heard a lot on this is like, well, just show a supportive parent in there. Was an important element of it. And you get the connection then between shaving Gillette and the transgender experience and why they're part of it. And I think that's one of the reasons why that was so successful.
What about brands where there's not such an immediate connection to, a rite of passage? This was beautiful, by the way. It helps me dimensionalize the experience, but other brands where there's not necessarily, do you have to find a link or what do you recommend to those brands how to think about this?
Well, I think it's always important to at least do the homework to understand where there may or not be a connection and making sure that you're fully bringing that to life. I think you can always find a link. I think it may take a little bit of creativity, but I think you can always find a link. But I think it's sometimes understanding there's two main gaps that we have today with the LGBTQ market. The first is around kind of the base level of representation. The Gina Davis Institute did a study of all the work entered into Cannes in 2019, before kind of COVID came into play. But about 1.8% of ads had discernible LGBTQ representation. So young people are identifying at upwards of 31% as being LGBTQ, yet 1.8% of ads have baseline discernible representation. We have an immediate gap there that we can start to solve, right? Whether we're connecting it deeply to a benefit that's going to resonate or have deep relevance. That's just an initial step forward. The other thing that we're recognizing more and more is that the LGBT community is not necessarily buying on gender constructs, but they're buying on jobs to be done. So they're deciding for themselves, let me decide how I'm going to use it. Let me decide. You tell me what it does. Don't tell me that this is going to be, we'll take Gillette, for example. Don't tell me that Venus, I can only use Venus if I identify as female. I want to shave in the pubic region, so I'm going to buy Venus. So that, the whole idea of how we're constructing our communication and the way that we're communicating who's to use it, why they're using it, what for, is kind of dramatically changing as well. So we have a job to do that goes beyond maybe sometimes that deep category connection to just how we're engaging the consumer in the products and the services that we provide.
I love that difference between moving from, because as a woman, the whole concerns about pink tax and women's razors, for that matter, has seemed so bizarre. So I love that as this first step. Going, did we really need this differentiation? I remember gosh, I wish I'd remembered to bring this on, or I thought to bring this on, but a year or so ago, I saw something about gendered toys for children. And it was like, should there be a gendered toy for children? It was like, do they play with it with their genitals? No, then no, there's no reason for there to be gendered toys for children. I kind of feel that way about so many things. So I love the idea of moving it to what's the problem solution and the full range of people who have that problem. Why is it, do you think, that what is it that's standing in the way of us as marketers? I mean, really thinking of, because I know there are a lot of marketers that are on this event, or at least are on most of Brand Innovators events. What is in the way of marketers being able to open to a new way of thinking? What blocks us?
There's a couple different things. I think, well, first of all, we did a study with GLAAD that looked at the biggest barriers that were driving LGBTQ inclusion in marketing. 10 years ago, that barrier would have been fear of backlash from those that were anti-LGBTQ. Number one barrier today is fear of backlash from the LGBTQ market for not getting it correct. And so I think there's just a broad fear of not, it's better to not try if I'm going to get it wrong than to try and maybe make a misstep, because the community at times can be a bit unforgiving. And we have got to think about how we're driving capability, both within our teams. Are we creating the right employee, recruitment, retention, and development opportunities within the company so those voices are heard to help us get it right? We need to make sure that we're driving that creative capability within our agencies that are bringing forth the work. It's not enough to be LGBTQ in order to get the craft of it correct. In fact, in the beginning, when we started doing a lot of our LGBTQ work, there was so much energy among our teams because they had never been given the opportunity to do LGBTQ centered work, that we made some mistakes going into it. It was like, we want to represent everything all at one time. And we recognize, there's some levers that you should pull and there's some levers that you shouldn't pull, but you pull them with intentionality. I'll give you one example. There was a Head and Shoulders ad that we created around prom that had two young females going to prom together. And in the ad, they kissed. And the ad did terrible. And we made the conclusion that people weren't ready to see LGBTQ PDA in advertisements. Well, we dug in a little bit deeper, and actually what we realized is that parents didn't want to see PDA, period, at prom. Didn't matter whether they were LGBTQ or not. Parents didn't want to think about their kids going off to prom and making out with their dates on the dance floor. And so it had nothing to do with them being LGBTQ, but it made us understand that you have to understand what levers are being pulled and why. And we don't need to always put everything in the kitchen sink in there in order to get the representation of the community right. And sometimes when you put too many of those levers in, you actually detract from the message that you're putting out there. And so we try to work with people all the time. Like, what is your end objective? And what kind of benefit and end communication do you want someone to take away? And is, for example, putting a transgender character in an ad in a bathroom going to end up with the right response? Are you making a statement about gender usage of bathrooms? Or are you actually making a statement about something else that potentially putting that environment may create a distraction? And so we're constantly thinking about how do we grow our understanding of how to communicate this well, and then what benefit are we trying to communicate? And that's been, I think, part of the challenge, because representing this community is rather difficult. If you were to put a white cisgender straight man and me next to each other visually, I mean, there may be some other cues that you may just assume I'm gay, and I'll let you decide what those are, but it's not necessarily as obvious as some other areas of underrepresented or marginalized consumers. So there's different shortcuts that we may go to. There's different things we may do. It could be holding hands. It could be some sort of PDA. It could be some sort of interaction. And we've got to continue to do our homework to understand what are going to be those cues that lets the consumer know they're talking to me without necessarily putting in a shortcut or a cue that you wouldn't use for another group.
it's so easy to make that misstep. It's so, and like you said, there's more penalty for doing it wrong than for not doing it at all. I know I looked back at my first conversation with you and I thought, oh, you're so tone deaf. You didn't think, I've gotten better attuned to those things through, how to be anti-racist and things like this in other categories. I haven't quite tuned this yet. Is it possible that our marketers we grew up in a completely not just gender binary, but role binary. I grew up in a role binary world. This is what mom did and this is what dad did. And by the way, mom looks like this and dad looks like this. How is it possible that it's just so deeply ingrained that we have to shake ourselves out of it? And how do we shake? How do we get from there to there? What are the tools? Are there I think you'd mentioned that there are tools in our space, in our category, that can give us data and information to bring us out of because these are deeply held things. These aren't lightly held biases we have. These are biases we've spent, many of the marketers have spent 30, 40, 50, 60 years perfecting.
Sure. I mean,
to leave them behind.
We feel it all the time internally as we talk about, different consumer groups. We'll generically say, well, what does she want? What does he want? And we talk in the binary just in terms of the generic consumer construct. And, we're changing that. One of the main ways we're changing that is because our young people are representing a different area of culture that when I grew up, it wasn't evident to me. And so we're creating those forums to have the conversation so that people are raising their hands and they're challenging our thinking. We work a lot with GLAAD as we go into some of our creative ideas, and we're going into shoots and we're going into casting to help us, make sure, our assumptions right here are the things that we can do better. We shot at Pantene a couple of years ago with the transgender chorus of LA. They came on the set with us and trained the crew before the chorus members came in, just to help sensitize them to some of the ways that we wanted to create a welcoming set, things that I wouldn't necessarily think about. So, for example, in this case, they said if anybody asks, where can I find the restroom? They say, there's a gender inclusive restroom here, there's a male restroom here, there's a female restroom here. You give all options, because you can never make the assumption that that person may be one thing or the other, identify a certain way. And those types of things help us learn, right? And the expectation is set from the top, but the behavior needs to be adopted by everybody. In terms of what you mentioned about data and data availability, Nielsen is now tracking LGBTQ households, and that's probably been the single biggest game changer for us, because it's helped us sit down with each brand to understand, like, where are you currently with the LGBTQ consumer? Like, what is the state of your business, and why is it that way? So if you have a 3-point market share gap versus what we call the average consumer, the non-LGBT consumer, well, why would you be 3 points behind? And so that allows us to get into a conversation about strategy and how we want to create our intent with the LGBTQ consumer. And then we can go in and do a bit of the diagnostic and the insight finding. But we have found that just getting the conversation with a health assessment of where you are with the consumer is the best way in for us to begin that journey with each brand.
So I keep talking and asking you questions, and I know you had some really amazing videos that you shared with me before. Was there something else that you wanted to share that was in video form that we should make a little for?
As we talk about the idea of creating insight and your category's role, and then to an execution, I want to share you an example of Pantene from Europe. Pantene, this would have been probably 4 or 5 years ago. We'd done some research with Harvard that demonstrated that hair is the most the number one visual way that people present themselves to the world, whether it be LGBTQ or not. It's the easiest way to change how you are presenting, who you are, what you feel, what you want to represent. For example, we found that a lot of women, if they go through a divorce or a breakup, cut their hair, or they may dye their hair. There's a lot of life changes brings with it a change in hair identity. And we wondered what that would mean for the LGBT community. And we found that 60% of LGBTQ people change their hair when they come out of the closet. And we thought, well, there we go, right? There is a reason why a hair care brand can enter the LGBTQ conversation and go in with a point of view that relates to the LGBTQ experience. And we also found that non-LGBTQ people, when we shared that stat with them, they all smiled. There was all this laugh. They're like, of course, it makes sense. Like, people would say like, oh, I changed my hair like right before I entered the workforce because I wanted to be maybe perceived as more professional or whatever it might be. But it was an insight that everybody kind of had a really interesting connection with. So Pantene adopted this program that initially focused on transgender women, and I'm going to share that with you now. In theory, sorry, I don't hit all my buttons very quickly. So, okay.
I grew up being told that people like me were ugly, that we were perverts. And I know that when I first transitioned, I didn't used to go out the house for weeks at a time because I was so ashamed.
When I was young, when I was a child, I always saw big, voluminous, dark brown hair, and I always wanted that.
My parents cut my hair short, and it wasn't an option for me to be who I always knew that I was from a very young age.
I didn't dare to ask for the haircut I wanted.
Un día vi la foto de una modelo y le dije a mi madre que yo quería tener el pelo como ella.
Finding my identity was finding how I want people to see me, and hair is such a big part of that. And I think now I'm starting my journey with my hair.
Cuanto más largo era mi pelo, más visible era yo para il resto del mondo.
Penso che sia importante che anche la vista possa capire quello che c'è dentro.
One day you may walk down the street with the wind blowing in your hair and just feel so happy to be alive.
Sono contenta con i miei capelli oggi, me li sto godendo e...
I'm doing what I want, and nobody can tell me what to do.
Whether you're trans or not, I think what trans people are showing is that we're allowed to exist in ways beyond what we've been told.
It's remarkable, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I think they just did a beautiful job of capturing something. And there's an interesting point, I think, in this is that with LGBTQ content that we create, a lot of times it's focused on one of two things. It's the removal of risk or the decrease of risk and the increase of reward. And what we see in the beginning of this is people identifying risk that they associate with being a transgender woman in this case. And at the end, we show the reward for what they've experienced by living as their full authentic self. And one of the things that we always try to do is not to dwell on the clouds. I always say, like, it's interesting that, the LGBTQ symbol is a rainbow because behind every rainbow are clouds. And sometimes in our storytelling, we focus a lot on the negativity. And sometimes we need to focus on the clouds a bit in order to set the scene, but we want to get to the reward as quickly as possible. We want to get to the joy of the consumer as quickly as possible. We don't want it to get so heavy that it becomes a challenge to watch. As I describe it to a lot of people that are non-LGBTQ, for example, like within the community, we don't focus on the clouds a lot in our own interpersonal relationships. most of my friends don't know my coming out story, and I don't know theirs. We don't sit around and talk about that element of our experience because part of that experience is assumed because we've all been through it in some way, shape, or form. So as a brand builder, I don't want to sit there and focus on it. I want to focus on it as much as I need to in order to make the story relatable. But if I focus too much on it, then I've created a weight in there that takes away, I think, the joy of what the human connection can help to bring.
I almost don't have words because that makes so much sense. What is, because I know we're coming to the end here, what is, I know there's no end game, there's never an end game in marketing, things just move and they shift. But 3 years from now, 5 years from now, if we collectively, the category, have done our jobs to better meet the unique needs and opportunities of this group, what does that look like? What is it then? Do we have to keep having these conversations, or there's a point where we've done this, or we've assimilated, or what does that look like?
Well, I think we're going to be moving from establishing a hardwired business case for inclusion to having conversations about what are the shifting dynamics of the community that we need to be aware of that are becoming more and more real. And I also think we're going to play a bigger role in intergenerational connectedness so that we can foster mutual understanding between the different experiences of people within the community. I think the education process is never going to be done, right? Because we're changing so fast. So it's always going to be about education, education, education. So I don't think it's going to be about the why. I think it's going to be about the how. And I hope we can get through the why conversation. I think we're getting through the why conversation even more quickly currently because of data availability and the whole 9 yards. But I want us to get beyond that this is the right thing to do for our business growth strategy to this is how we can perfect the craft and do it really, really, really well. Because, the impact that we have is just not on our business, it's on the people that see this, see the work that we do. We did one commercial one campaign with Gus Kenworthy, who's an Olympian skier. And we got a letter back, handwritten, which we don't get too many of these days, but from a young consumer. And he decided to come out of the closet after seeing the ad.
Wow.
And the last line on the letter just said, "Thank you for saving another soul." And it makes you stop and think about the impact of the images that we put out into the world, the way we put them out, and then the relatability that it creates. And, even if our business didn't grow from it, when you get a letter like that, you start to understand that your mission is bigger than that. Your mission is in connecting people and using your voice in any way you can. Some people have been critical about corporate involvement in LGBTQ issues or LGBTQ equality or pride. And my point of view is like, listen, this is the voice I've been given, and my voice manifests itself through brands. And if I can help shift our communities to more fully use that voice to create positive cultural change, to bring communities together, to potentially show a young person that there is a world out there for that, then that's a tremendous responsibility. And I will welcome any company to that conversation. We'll welcome any company to that, into that pride for the first time, because that is when we're going to create sustained change. And that's where we can have a real impact, working alongside different NGOs, different charities, different activists that have different voices that can do different things. Together, we can do incredible stuff.
Well, like you said, just like an individual marketer, sometimes it's easier to sit on the sidelines and not risk sticking your neck out. But the real rewards come when you take that chance. And you said, you may be criticized for corporate involvement, but you would just as quickly be criticized for your lack of corporate responsibility if you don't step in. So I don't think there's any way to get through the world with this life without criticism. At least I haven't found that way. So I love it that, you choose your battles, you do the best that you can. And one thing you said to me when we first talked was, we have to have brands that are willing to make a mistake and say, I'm sorry, I pushed that too far. Or I'm sorry, I didn't really understand it as deeply as I should have when I did that. And then our responsibility, I think, as audiences always, is to understand the intention rather than maybe what came out. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I always remember there was a line from like a live performance from Cher where she said, you know, what's the worst that can happen? You can always look back and say, I shouldn't have done that. And the fact of the matter is, if we wait to get it all perfect, we're going to be waiting for a long time, and we're going to be missing the chance to connect with people and missing the chance to make positive change. And so it's accept the fact that you're going to make mistakes. But I think if you go in with the right intent, there's always a way to move forward.
Carrie's like our human.
I'm the human hug.
We pull people off the stage with, right?
No, I just want to thank you both so much for coming out. And I know that video of Samson specifically, I'm never going to forget that. So thank you, Brent, for sharing that, especially. This was a great session. And thank you both so much for spending the time with us today, and enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to bring on our next part of our next group. We've got Erica Jones coming in from Kellogg. We're just waiting on her partner in crime here, Ben Shore. But it'll be just a moment.
Can you hear me?
Hear you. I can't see you yet, but I can hear you.
Okay, let me get up and running here.
There she is. Oh, and now I can't hear you, Erica.
Can you see and hear me?
Yes, beautiful. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Great. You know, that's the question at the beginning of every call, right? Is the technology?
Yeah. Who am I here? Am I on? Do I look like a cat?
Exactly.
So I know we're giving Ben just another second to hop on. So why don't you, Erica, tell us a little about yourself and your role at Kellogg?
Yeah, so I'll give the brief overview now. And as part of our presentation, I'll go into more of the details. But my name is Erica Jones, and I am Senior Manager of Cultural and Inclusive Marketing at the Kellogg Company. I have been with the company now for 9 years as of this month. Yeah, so really
happy anniversary.
Thank you so much. And I've worked pretty much in a variety of different roles, all within the marketing organization. So everything from cereal to frozen foods to snacks. And most recently, I was leading Pop-Tarts innovation on the marketing side. So that was a super fun assignment. And then about a year and a half ago, Kellogg started the Cultural and Inclusive Marketing team. And I was tapped to be a part of that new team. So for the past 18 months or so, I have been a part of our newly established Cultural and Inclusive Marketing team within Kellogg North America. And we work across all of our business units, all of our category teams on really embedding ED&I and inclusive marketing into our organization.
I love it. And that's going to be a little bit about what you're sharing today, specifically about Pop-Tarts, from what I saw.
That is correct. So today we will be specifically talking about our Pop-Tarts case study, which is, well, we've done several different initiatives on Pop-Tarts, but the one we'll be talking about today is Pride and the LGBTQ plus Pride program that we did just this month. So very timely.
I love it. Do you want to go ahead and start sharing that while we're waiting for Ben to join, and we can let him hop along in?
Cool. Let me just get my screen shared. Let's see here, share screen.
It's the other hardest part of any Zoom.
I know, right?
Can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you see my screen?
Exactly. Let's see if I can do this here.
All right, there we are.
Okay, so you can see the screen. Okay, wonderful. Okay, and now let me just go into presentation mode. Okay, is that better now?
That's perfect.
Okay, great, and I can still see the video, so that's good. Sometimes with these, it's like I can't see myself on the screen at the same time. So this is awesome. And we will hopefully Ben will be able to get in. I know maybe he might be having some technology challenges, but
I know he's on the way. So
okay, cool. Yep. Okay, cool.
And speak of the devil.
Hello.
Ta-da.
Oh my gosh.
Welcome,
figuring out
Ben.
Zoom and his register and join meeting in progress, all the clicks, all the clicks.
All the clicks.
Great to see you.
Thanks for joining us. And I'm going to let the two of you take it away, and I will see you afterwards.
Cool. Thank you so much. So
thanks,
Ben, yes, thank you. So Ben, I was just giving a brief overview of myself, like quick, 30 seconds of myself, my role, and how long I've been at the company. And then we can jump into the presentation, but would love for you to also just introduce yourself really, really quickly, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, looking forward, hopefully, to some robust conversations. So hopefully y'all are pinging in the chat at various points, and then please feel free. So I'm Ben. I'm on philanthropy and social impact within global corporate affairs at Kellogg. And so my job is to focus on taking the brand equities and digging into our ESG strategy as a company and bringing it to life cross-functionally with Erica on multicultural and inclusive marketing, with our business employee resource groups, which I'll get to in a hot sec, with integrated marketing more broadly, our customers, our category teams, and then folks like you and other stakeholders out there in the world, where we can create really amazing partnerships to bring those equities to life in a way that's going to impact the world. We've got a lot going on in the world, and people, as you'll kind of see, want brands to be where they are and help, be a part of their life's experiences and solving problems in their day-to-day life. So that's what I do. I'm also the co-chair of K-Pride and Allies, which is one of our business employee resource groups. We have 8 in the US, and we'll get to that in the presentation, but so excited to be here.
Great, thank you so much, Ben. And I'm really excited for this presentation and sharing more about how we've collaborated together. So what we're gonna do, we have about 30-40 minutes or so. We just did introductions, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about ED&I and our cultural and inclusive marketing team at Kellogg. Then I'll talk a bit about the employee resource groups, and Ben will then do a bit of a double click into the K-Pride group. And then we will talk about the case study, which is the Pop-Tarts Pride. And Ben has worked very closely on this, so he'll be sharing a lot on that and how he's partnered with the brand team on that in his role within the company. And then we'll close out and see if there are any questions or discussions. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So just want to set the scene here and just remind everyone that, the Kellogg Company has really been committed to diversity all along. And our vision is really a good and just world where people are not just fed, but fulfilled. And we want to make sure we're creating better days and a place at the table for everyone, really, through our food and through our initiatives and communities. So that is at our core, and you'll see that come through in a lot of the work that we do. So really excited about that. And so I talked a little bit about the cultural and inclusive marketing team at the beginning, but I want to go into a few more details. So as you know, a lot of companies really doubled down on their ED&I commitments a couple of years ago. And so Kellogg was a company that, also wanted to make sure that we were really leaning in even more to our efforts that were already underway. And so our team was established about 18 months ago, so the beginning of 2021, and it's really focused on cultural and inclusive marketing within the KNA, or Kellogg North American organization. So we work across our cereal, snacks, and salty. We have a lot of different business units. I won't go through them all, but all of our different business units, frozen veggie, et cetera. on really how do we embed ED&I into our strategies, brand strategies, brand plans. So obviously we have quite a few brands in our portfolio. And though we work across all the brands, there are a few priority brands that we work with in each of the categories. So for example, within our portable wholesome snacks portfolio, Pop-Tarts and Rice Krispie Treats, for example, are two of the key brands there that we collaborate with. And so really our work is focused on three major areas. It's people, go-to-market, and industry and partner leadership. When it comes to people, we partner with our ED&I group, which is a separate corporate group, to really help focus on our ED&I talent goals. So that could be recruiting, et cetera, for new talent within the marketing organization. We also focus on professional development. So that's doing trainings and various seminars and sessions to make sure that our marketers are, receiving all of the latest and greatest tools and information on, why this is so important and best practices on how to do that. A lot of our time is spent in go-to-market, and so this is working with the brands on everything from assignment briefs to creative review, looking at scripts, casting, etc., all the way into experience planning. Looking at influencer strategy, even the media buying that we do, etc. And then finally, industry and partner leadership. So that is making sure that we are connecting with industry groups like brand innovators, making sure that we are hearing more of what other companies are doing, learning and sharing. And that's really an exciting part of our work as well. And then finally, supplier diversity. So making sure that our suppliers that we're using, our vendors, are also diverse and really embedding that into how we do our work. So I know I went through quite a lot there. I could spend way more time on this, but I'm not going to, because we definitely want to get to Ben's portion and talk about this exciting Pop-Tarts case study. But that's an overview. So it keeps us busy. There are 3 of us on our team. So we are in back-to-back meetings all day, every day, most of the time. But I think we all are, right? Okay, so moving on, and I kind of touched on this before, our ED&I vision is really about being a best-in-class company for diversity and inclusion. So, we want to be sure we are lifting up, seeking out, and leading in when it comes to that. And this is an example of this actually in action. And so I want to shift gears a little bit, because what I didn't touch on yet was our business employee resource groups. And so I know a lot of companies have them, right? There are different acronyms at different companies. At Kellogg, we call them BERGs. So that is Business Employee Resource Groups. And we have quite a few of them. They're listed here on the page. I won't go into detail on them all, but what they are employee groups, whether it's, Latino employees, African-American employees, Gay Pride, et cetera. And they really are business resources. So we actually changed the name from ERGs to BRGs a few years ago. This was that was already in motion before our team, to really establish that the BERGs are business resources as well, right? And so what our team has done in the past 18 months is really help embed the BERGs into the marketing process. So beforehand, maybe like 2-3 years ago, the BERGs a lot of times were consulted on various initiatives with the marketers, but we found that it was sometimes ad hoc, right? Kind of here and there, not fully integrated. We said, hey, there's an opportunity to really collaborate even more closely with BERGs. And so that's what we've been doing. So in my role, when we have specific initiatives that relate to a certain consumer cohort, right, we then bring in the BERG leadership early on to provide feedback on the insight, the strategy, the plan, et cetera, so that the BERG leaders are with, lockstep with the brand team, the CNI team, the corporate social responsibility team, et cetera, from the get-go. And this has really, really improved our go-to-market strategy. And I think we have really strong programs there. So with that, I want to now shift gears here, and Ben will talk a little bit more about the Gay Pride group and their specific vision and mission, because it is related to this case study we're talking about today.
Thanks. And, as a part of that go-to-market strategy and what we are internally to Kellogg and why we come together as a group, it's all related to our Kellogg vision and mission. So what you saw at the top with that Erica showed, really cascades down into who we are and what we're going to be doing as a group. So we thought about that long and hard as we evolved that vision and mission as Kellogg over the past couple of years, and really wanting to integrate that because we want to support that vision and mission. And so here in KPA, we drive bold, positive, forward thinking with Kellogg partners, customers, employees, supporting equality for our community around the world, allowing for better days. So we got all the words in there of, that Kellogg stands for. We got everything in there for our community. And how do we do that? Through our mission. We create these opportunities, programming, representation, visibility, and acceptance internally and externally. We have to focus on who we are as a company, and I'll get to that in a second. And then, of course, what do we want to achieve externally with all of our stakeholders as Kellogg? And then creating a seat at the table, which is really ensuring that we listen to people, we create space and leverage our platforms, which is true allyship in ensuring that other people have equitable access to what they need, not just equality. So if you can go on, Erica. So what do we do? How do we achieve it? We have different distinct pillars within our business employee resource groups, set up by our ED&I team that they've really provided a really strong template for. In how do we want to be good partners to the business, good partners to folks like Erica, myself at my day job, and other cross-functional partners to bring this to life. Obviously, today we're focusing on the external marketplace, but of course we have to be there and really build who we are internally at Kellogg. I wouldn't want to bring a program to market about the Black queer community, which is what we're doing with Pop-Tarts, if first we weren't focusing on our policies internally at Kellogg. If people inside of Kellogg had no idea what that community looked like, or that they didn't care. We have to build a caring, loving community within each of our business employee resource groups around our missions and who we are if we're going to take something to market. There's nothing more hollow than doing the opposite. So that's what we focus on internally, and we do it through a variety of different ways, focusing on community space. We call it snack chats, where we kind of come together, share our experiences, learn about one another. And just because you're a part of the LGBTQ plus community and you're a letter in the alphabet, you don't know about yourself and your own history. This is just your identity, your gender expression, your exact, so everything. You may not know your own history. So we want to provide people a community and a sense of place and a space to share that. We also focus on visibility across the community. So throughout the year, telling people what's going on in the community, important days and calls to action. But then in the marketplaces, we then transition from what we want to talk about internally in terms of education, take that externally. And over the years, we've had really strong partnerships with Erica's team on multicultural and inclusive, and prior to that with broadly integrated marketing and the brands at Kellogg to focus on building out our partnerships with GLAAD. We have other partnerships with Centerlink and PFLAG as a BERG, and we focus externally on combating bullying for LGBTQ plus youth with our brands. And so that's how we've focused on engaging in that space in an authentic way, which I'll talk about in just a second, around Pride and around Spirit Day. We actually started with Spirit Day a number of years ago with our GLAAD partnership, creating a platform called All Together, bringing together all of our cereals, everyone deserving that seat at the table, and creating that space for that conversation with our partners at GLAAD, which was wonderful because it actually focused first, as everyone does in marketing, on strong insights. And what the insight was that led us there was that kids and youth in the community across a variety of different moments, but particularly around breakfast as well, skip breakfast at home. They may not be in a home that is affirming of their identity and of who they are. And so it was an opportunity, just as we do across all of our brands, to bring people together around amazing food experiences. And what better way to bring people together than at that critical moment where kids need to be nurtured by their families, their friends, their chosen family, which we'll get to in a second. And that is how we go to market with our partners at GLAAD to combat bullying, create that space for people to come together. First, it was around cereal, and we evolved that over the years with a number of different brands. Here, of course, with Pop-Tarts, which now we can turn to.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ben, for sharing a little bit more about K-Pride and the various initiatives and areas of focus there. And so with that, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about the case study on Pop-Tarts Pride. And Ben has been, just so close with working with the team on this. So he's going to talk about, most of the program, but I just want to tee it up here and just say this was very much a collaborative effort. So I remember we started talking about this back even when I was on the Pop-Tarts team, so a couple of years ago. So, and it's exciting now to see how it's evolved and to see this in the market now. And so again, it's a collaboration between, the brand team, cultural inclusive, marketing, the Bergs, as well as the ESG group. And so, and then our external partners, GLAD, Neon, et cetera, and some community partners in various cities across the country, which Ben will touch on a little bit more there later. So with that, let's dive into this case study on Pop-Tarts Pride. And really the important thing here is, we wanted to create this with the community, not for or to the community, but with. And I think you'll see that throughout this example. So I am going to flip to the next slide, and then Ben, do you want to dive in? And I'll maybe jump in here or there if I have a comment, but take it away, Ben.
I think for every brand, it's about what's the brand, who's the target, what's the brand promise, what are the unique assets of the brand, what are the reasons to believe that a brand has with its target consumer. All of that with Pop-Tarts was at the center of what we're doing. You can't just, like Erica said, make something for a community, especially if it was something that makes no sense for the brand and who the brand is. It would just read as something nobody needed to participate in. So Pop-Tarts, of course, wants to focus on the Gen Z space. That's where, I grew up in musical theater and, ate brown cinnamon sugar Pop-Tarts out of my vending machine on stage. It's right there in that cohort, So what's also super cool is that over the years, and if you've noticed it, and if you're Pop-Tarts ears, they've also invented a really cool opportunity to print art on top of the Pop-Tarts, making an even more individual experience, which is even more so in the rationale of what the brand is trying to do, making it a personal experience. You see there's a cross marketing and creating really personal experiences for people with food and all other goods and services that people are having. They want to have a personal experience with it. So this creates that opportunity. And then the approach for doing that is creating a message that really, resonates, and doing so with credible partners. So longtime partners with GLAD, talked with them, really dug deep. What's important to the community right now? You need to understand. You can't, in the space. And if you dig deep on this particular community, I'm a part of the community, but digging deep in it is to understand what's needed now. Actually, Black queer voices and the Black queer experience is incredibly underserved in LGBTQ plus marketing, the actual community itself, and raising up stories and creators is really one of the most important and special ways that we can highlight the community, which often is neglected in terms of national organizations. And so working with them, we found Thaddeus Coates, an amazing artist that's a part of the Neon Collaborative at GLAD, which focuses on queer and traditional Black spaces. And so we talked about ensuring that we would create this with him. He would it would be his brainchild, and we would print it on the Pop-Tarts and leverage it on the pack itself to create a beautiful experience for people that would create that full experience for consumers when they got it, highlighting that experience. And then dive in with the experience plan with them as well, in partnership with GLAD, in partnership with Thaddeus. We did some amazing, cool things with customers around this and with consumers. So I'm excited to talk to you about that. We go to the next slide. How do we zone in on this particular topic? So we focused on Pop-Tarts foundations that we were kind of like leaning in again to that individual experience. You would be one of a kind. But the thing about Pride, and if you celebrated Pride, it's kind of like the biggest holiday of the year because it's a moment where you get to be a part of a community. During the pandemic, I think we all found that we had a lot of separation from people. And there's a lot of loneliness in the community and loneliness in the world. And so you can have that one personal experience, but you want to be a part of a community and you want to be able to engage with your community. So you're one of a kind, but you're never alone. So you have a big space, you have a big community to be a part of, and you can celebrate that with Pop-Tarts. And so we celebrate that individuality that people have, and it brings us together. And then what are the tensions within the community? So awareness of the community, like I mentioned, accessibility to those types of celebratory events. You know, if you go to Queen's Pride, you have amazing Latino, LGBTQIA folks running around the streets, but it's not necessarily what's reflected on, Fifth Avenue Parade or out in other parts of the country. So being able to access this was really important. Getting that sense of community, being authentic. What does the community need? And then being able to have it be a celebration. There's a lot of strife in the community and a lot of things affecting the community right now across the country. And we want to celebrate and create a moment to recognize, that, as well as create a moment of positivity for the community to be excited. So focusing on acceptance at that intersection for the community. You can move on. And so this is where we arrive on how do you bring all that together? How do you make it accessible? What's the focus for the message? And so we understand that the idea of a chosen family, which is a fundamental component of acceptance, people finding if they may not be in an affirming home, they may not come from a community that's very large, they may not see others like themselves, that we want to create spaces where people can find their chosen family or celebrate their chosen family. So friends, new family, people that they create, and that is really on the rise. It's this idea of thriving. It's not good anymore just to be. You need to be able to thrive. So just being accepted isn't even necessarily enough anymore. It's that you find your chosen family and you can thrive. And so looking at community-based spaces and gatherings for this community to foster and celebrate that chosen family is key. And that's how we landed on leveraging the chosen family in the way that it then came to life through Thaddeus's artwork. So if you go to the next slide. And so that's how we came up with a block party, right? A traditional amazing space. You've ever been in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, you've seen cookouts, over the weekend. And I love being a part of those, but making that accessible for the Black queer community, that's something else. And being sure that, you can live your true and authentic life wherever you would have lived your life anyway, and doing that with your chosen family, being able to celebrate that moment and thrive in that moment. So Thaddeus created this amazing artwork celebrating that, and that we then cascaded the iconography onto each of the Pop-Tarts. And so it's this beautiful message on the side as well, which is just Thaddeus's own quote about being engaged. We leveraged it on our pink lemonade. It's actually in my kitchen right now, delicious. And then we took it across a number of different consumer touch points, which we'll get to in just a second. So Eric, you can move forward.
And then one thing I just want to say on this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And when I first saw this artwork, I was like, oh my gosh, it's just so vibrant, so fun. And it's really the first time we've used an independent artist, right, to create work for our packaging. And so that's huge that we were able to collaborate and work with an independent artist on creating artwork, which is really a different approach than what we typically do. So really exciting to work that we were working on this, and I just love this artwork.
And he loved it too. I mean, that's the point too, right? Is like we can love it. It's new for us, but the community needs to see that effort, and that us doing that is us going all in and trusting the process, and it was absolutely wonderful. So I encourage you to follow him on Instagram and TikTok. He is so engaged in celebrating this art, and we are too. So it's super cool.
Yep.
So it worked. We launched it June 1st. At the start of Pride, went out with some tactics that would be familiar with you. Press releases, social support, national outreach. We had some drops of the boxes each week. Then celebrating and selling them through our Instagram shop, and then money that we then donated to 4 different organizations. So another aspect of this program was to lift up queer-owned organizations, queer-run organizations that were really diving deep within their communities to raise up what they were doing in celebration of that chosen family, chosen spaces, and really exemplifying what the program was all about. So we have amazing organizations that we partnered with, from Destination Tomorrow, which is in both New York and Atlanta, out to the Salt Eaters Bookshop in San Francisco. Amazing people doing really good things, and creating awareness and leveraging our platform. Again, a key piece of allyship, which is our goal as KPA, and Pop-Tarts' goal of engaging this audience, is really leveraging that platform so that then these organizations could speak. And then throughout June, we sustained it, seeding those boxes with influencers, unpaid seeding, garnering kind of earned engagements within the community, and focusing it on the right ones. You don't need necessarily your A-list celebrity, you need the community. So sending it to the right people within the community who are engaged with GLAAD, who are engaged with these organizations. They may not have the biggest following, but they have the right following. And these are the people. So you don't need to communicate to someone who's going to appear on the Today Show just because it's on the Today Show. It won't be where your audience is. And so that's why we made sure, in partnership with GLAAD and Neon, to send these to the right folks and engage the right way. And then these are those organizations, and we sent each of them $10,000, to support them in their missions. And they're all wonderful. I hope you can check them out on Instagram. We had some great reels that they all recorded to engage, and that we then supported as well. And so they had inclusion in our media materials, and we sent them money as well, of course, to support their ongoing mission. So fantastic organizations, and we then dropped Pop-Tarts as a part of the sale each week to continue to excite consumers. You can, and a little bit about just how we chose them. Again, getting to who are the right organizations, focusing on chosen families, and are those gathering spaces where you can thrive as a part of the BIPOC LGBTQ+ community. So that's really who these organizations are. There's a ton as well that we looked at, and I wish we could support everybody, and I would spend $1 billion, but this was a fantastic way to start in on this type of partnership.
Yep, and I really love this community-based partnership. And one of the areas of focus of our C&I team is also making sure that we're really reaching out to key DMAs or markets, right, where diverse cohorts over-index. And so it's exciting to see that we were able to partner coast to coast with different organizations within the communities versus a national approach. We are, leaning in on specific cities and partnering with local small businesses. So that was a really exciting piece of this. And, I encourage anyone who's in any of these cities to, definitely check out these organizations and businesses.
That was a part of the accessibility of the program too, making something available on the Instagram shop for Pop-Tarts, spreading that through media, working with influencers that would cover geographic diversity, and then the organizations here as well, so that people could kind of see, feel, hear, touch the program wherever they were. And then, of course, Thaddeus was so engaged with us. Please follow all of his handles. He's amazing. He's also been doing some other amazing partnerships throughout Pride Month. So he is just such a creative talent. And, I think the art speaks for itself. Erica mentioned it earlier at the top, really trying to celebrate the Thrive nature about, what his approach is to his art, things that bring joy to him and to all of us in the community. And then being able to celebrate the fun and ingenious nature of Pop-Tarts. So he took the brief and really dove in. So his compositions are, really powerful, but they're emotional. And so when we all first saw that, like Erica said, all you could say is that there's joy at that block party. And so it was, it leveraged all the uniqueness of Pop-Tarts. It leveraged the color palette of Pop-Tarts. So that's all there, but so is the meaning behind, the program itself and where we really wanted to go. So it's just a little bit more about him, but please do engage with him on social.
Yep.
Yeah. You want to go to the next one?
Definitely.
That's it.
That's it. Yes. So that was our overview. Ben, thank you so much for walking through that program. And it's just really exciting to see how it all came together, right? I mean, we've been working on this for quite a while, and to really see this, actually, launched and in the community is really just so exciting.
Yeah, it takes a while to get something like this off the ground in the right way. You got to work through packaging. You're talking about food, and so getting it right there, getting the artwork done when it needs to go to print, and trying to get some level of an experience plan done in time in order for that to happen in a way that makes sense. So, and then actually launching it and doing it the right way. I appreciate the affirmation of it, both in the community and then elsewhere, especially as you think about these particular spaces where you're talking about social issues and other parts of, like, going beyond a Pop-Tart as a Pop-Tart, but what is a Pop-Tart in the queer community? You have to get it right. And so analyses of these programs that people have been doing, or that the community has just organically said, is that we got it right. And it's like, I can sleep better at night knowing that I'm a part of the community and I didn't make something that was terrible, or that didn't hit the mark, or that didn't make real impact. So that was the most important to all of us in KPA.
Yep, exactly. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just go back to regular video. And I think we have maybe about 5 minutes or so. If there were any questions, Carrie, just let us know, and we would be happy to answer those.
Yeah, I don't know where everybody else is from too, but I would love to hear that too, and what type of engagement they have in this space.
It doesn't look like a question, but Ben, Lauren has replied to your question about the ERGs, BRGs.
Yeah.
Just saying, this is great. Engaging operationally via marketing is awesome, instead of thinking of them as as an expense, or at best a recruiting tool. So she chimed in with that.
It is always a part of HR and talent, and it is incredibly important to create these spaces. And Walter, who is one of our ED&I leaders, I mean, it's all critical, to have those things for those reasons. But to be able to leverage it, no matter what your business model is, in a different way, also provides a much better experience to those members, so that, you could create a club like K Pride and Allies, and we could all, and create a common space, and it's important. And maybe we can talk about policies that, are critical, but we're a food company. What better way than to bring us all together and leverage us, and we eat too. So, how does that happen? And how do we eat? And how do we engage with the brands in a wonderful way in partnership with Erica and others? It's been amazing to do this.
Yep.
I also really, I'm sorry. I'm just joining the conversation now.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, Ben, the fact that you said kind of in the beginning, you didn't want to do any real campaigns about it unless you were living it internally. That was really awesome to hear. And it's a great thing to know you're starting at home is always a good.
Well, we check with our nonprofit. I mean, my day job is working with the nonprofit partners, and I dual hat here, but across the board, our other business employee resource groups do the same exact thing. Are we showing up for the community in a way that the community would recognize and is impactful? So with this program, are we showing up, talking with GLAAD, HRC, other stakeholders about what's going on in the issue space, and how are we showing up? We can create this Pop-Tarts experience, but do we have the policies and procedures inside Kellogg that reflect what's needed from the community? Maybe. We're also just kind of people, so we're not experts in HR policies, so ask them. Also externally in the country, what's going on? Are we showing up for the community in that way? And we made sure of that for any time that we've activated.
And we do have one more question from the Q&A from Lauren again. Curious, do your Bergs ever bring ideas to marketing rather than being a resource for marketing?
Yeah, you know what, and I'm actually really happy about this question. It was actually the comment the build I wanted to make, and this is that we're now involving our Bergs not only on like the commercial idea side, but also on innovation as well too. And so embedding them into the process. So yes, if the Bergs have ideas on the innovation side, when it comes to our food innovation, we have now established a process where we are involving them in the category innovation ideations for, new products, new flavors, etc. And as well, if they have other ideas, they can share that too. So it's now, again, like embedding into our existing process as well, so that they're able to, share their ideas, gain more traction, etc. So it definitely does go both ways now. We're still, in that journey, early in that journey, but we have established that. And so that's really exciting that the Bergs can get involved in that way.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you both so much for joining us today. We really appreciated having you on and speaking and sharing your deck and your work. And I am suddenly craving a Pop-Tart. I don't know why.
Always. My husband ate 2 of them this morning. So totally.
Well, thank you to everyone again for joining us today. That's actually going to wrap our day. Want to thank all our speakers, our sponsors, and everyone in the audience for joining us. Be sure to tune in to our next sessions next week, and don't forget to check out our website, the Brand Innovators website, to see what goodies we've got going on.